an overview of the scheme, look in a bit more detail at the criteria. So there are obviously different criteria for different levels. So we'll work our way through those in some detail, and some final comments and reflections. And I think, perhaps some points in particular that it's worth my emphasising, the sort of top tips and perhaps the common mistakes that we see made in applications, just to help you navigate that. So just to start with some key principles, the promotion is based on achieving a series of recognised standards. So the way we set it up is that these are in clearly defined sections to help both you demonstrate your achievements most effectively, but also for the promotions committees to be able to work through in an organised way and see everything that you want to share with them in terms of your promotions application. The promotion is based on academic peer review, and that does include some external elements. So it is an academic panel of your peers with some external assessors. There is no cap on the number of places, so you're not competing against each other in terms of applying for promotion. These promotions rounds are held regularly with 6 monthly deadlines, so they run twice a year. High levels of performance are expected across 3 core areas, so 3 core criteria as appropriate to your contract. And the contracts the core criteria around research and scholarship, teaching and learning, and what we call contribution. So that's there's lots of different phrases for that, something along good citizenship, how you contribute to the wider university. So there's clear definitions of that in the supporting literature and information online. As a candidate, you're expected to demonstrate that you're performing into the level to which you've applied for promotion, and also that you're likely to continue performing. So it's not a cliff edge where you get promoted and then you stop. What the promotion committee are looking for is evidence of what we call trajectory, so that you're on a pathway of performance and that you're likely and well positioned to continue performing over time. And all normal academic and administrative activity can be included in the application. So we look at many different facets of your activities as an academic. So all academics with a minimum of 3 years of service in an academic post at the University of Galway are eligible to apply to any higher grade, irrespective of their current grade. So it doesn't mean that you have to do it stepwise. It also means that, for example, if you're on a lecturer A pathway, you can apply for example, senior lecturer, associate professor on the lecture B pathway, and vice versa. So you just have to make it very clear what you're applying for and make sure that you meet the criteria as they're laid out. There are 2 promotions committees, one which is called APC, which is the Academic Promotions Committee, and the other which is called EPPC, which focuses especially on the established professor promotions. Both committees are gender balanced at exactly 50-50 male and female. As a university, we're committed to equality, diversity and inclusion in the scheme, and our progress in relation to that is constantly reviewed and reported on in this regard. So this will include a specific mechanism to recognise protective leave and adjustments that take this into consideration for the purposes of assessment. So there is an opportunity for you to report on protective leave, and then as it says here, there are specific boxes where any additional information that you might want to share in respect of achievements and circumstances can be shared. There's also a box which began in round 3 to take into account the impact of COVID, and that remains on the form. So if you feel there's something that you want the panel to know in relation to this, there's space for that on the form as well. So this assists the promotions committee in assessing whether there's anything in the criteria that will have had an impact on the achievements that you're reporting. And financial considerations in respect of affordability to the school, college or university play no part in the individual assessments. It seems strange starting with appeals, but to make you aware that there is an appeals panel. So all unsuccessful candidates will receive detailed written feedback on their application and their agreed score sheet. They may also request an oral feedback meeting in a timely fashion, so within 30 days of receiving the written feedback. So that's available to all candidates. It is then possible to request further information, such as other assessment records, minutes, personal notes, discussion documents and correspondence. And as it says here, you request that information via the academic promotions contact email, which is available on the website. Other documents such as external assessment forms can be sought if required through the Freedom of Information process. So there are steps that you can go through if you want to get more information about your applications should you be unsuccessful. All unsuccessful candidates may appeal to the Academic Promotions Appeals Committee, which is called the APAC. It is a requirement of the scheme that a candidate attend for oral feedback. So as I previously said, oral feedback is offered, but you need to attend the oral feedback in order to be eligible to appeal. Any appeal must be lodged within 30 days of your oral feedback meeting. The role of the APAC is to consider whether or not due process has prevailed in the consideration by the Academic Promotions Committee of an application for promotion. So the APAC may not form a second judgment about the application. So there are 3 key grounds for appeals. So failure to follow in a due manner the university policy and procedures for the consideration of applications for promotions. So all university policies and procedures are subject to statutory anti-discrimination requirements. The second ground is denial of natural justice. And the third ground is manifestly unfair or unreasonable application of the criteria for the granting of promotions. So those are the key grounds that the APAC will look at and appeal on. And appeals should be sent to the Academic Promotions Appeals email, which again is available on the website. So in terms of assessment and scoring, as I've previously said, we have 2 promotions committee. The APC, the Academic Promotions Committee, considers applications for senior lecturer / associate professor, both type A and type B, and professor in applications. And then the EPPC, so the Established Professor Promotions Committee, will consider established professor applications. So there are 2 different panels to be aware of. But you will only be considered by one panel, depending on where your application is going to. So the APC, the Academic Promotions Committee, in advance of the APC meeting, 4 committee members within the APC are allocated as what we call core readers to each application to go through the individual application in particularly fine detail. So 2 of the core readers will be from the relevant college and 2 will be from other colleges, so not the applicant's home college. And again, we will have 50-50 gender representation between those core readers. One of those 4 core readers will be designated the feedback lead and will take detailed notes during the discussion that form the basis of feedback to applicants. And that feedback is subsequently agreed by the whole committee. All applications are read by each member of the committee. So we do have core readers, but every committee member will read every application in detail. And each member of the committee assesses and scores each application individually prior to the meeting. These are provisional scores, The 2 external members of the committee don't score the applications, but they will read them. And the committee as a whole will then discuss and agree a consensus score for each criterion for each candidate. So the final agreed score does not happen until the committee meets. Any scoring that individual members do is considered provisional. The relevant achievement has to be demonstrated in order for the criterion to receive a consensus decision of yes, i.e. that the criterion has been achieved. So within the established professor committee, in advance of the established professor meeting, 2 committee members are allocated as core readers. So it's a smaller committee, just to be aware of that in terms of numbers, to each application. So 2 core readers are allocated to each application to go through the individual application in particularly fine detail. 1 core reader will be from each applicant's relevant college and 1 from another college. And again, there'll be a 50-50 gender representation among the core readers. 1 of the 2 will be designated as the feedback lead and take detailed notes during discussions that will form the basis of feedback to applicants, and the feedback is subsequently agreed by the whole committee. All applications are read by each member of the committee, and each member of the committee assesses and scores each application individually prior to the meeting. And again, as I've said, the same pattern, these are provisional scores. Only when the committee then meets and discusses as a whole and agrees a consensus score for each criterion is that score then taken as the score of the committee. The relevant achievement has to be demonstrated in order for the criterion to achieve a consensus decision of yes, and then the criterion is awarded. So this sounds a bit complicated. Hopefully it will make more and more sense as we go through. Prior to the meetings, each member of the committees submits their provisional scores in respect of each candidate. The scores are then transposed onto a spreadsheet, and this is the basis for the discussion at the meeting. And in the next slide, I'll show you an example of the spreadsheet, so you'll see how it works. A score 1 means the candidate is assessed by the individual scorer not to be achieving the criterion. A score of 2 means the assessor is unsure and needs input clarification and is seeking further discussion from the panel, either APC or EPPC. And a score 3 means the candidate is achieving the criterion. Where there are a majority of 3 scores and no 1s, the score would be an automatic yes under this criterion, unless a panel member raises a point for discussion. In all other profiles, there'll be further discussion. So I'll illustrate that on the score sheet that comes up on the next slide, so it will make sense to you. There must be a consensus that criterion is being achieved for a final consensus decision of yes. And the decision can only be yes or no. So there's no ambiguity, there's no maybes. So there has to be a consensus, and it has to be either yes or no. And for every criterion, the protected leave multiplier, the COVID impact are factored into the discussions and regularly re-highlighted during the discussion if they apply. So this is an example of a scoring sheet. So it is a fictitious example, but it shows you, basically, you can see in the column over on the left-hand side that you have all of the assessors anonymised, but with their scores here. And then you can see you have a whole range of criteria. And in this case, this is an example from a senior lecturer appropriate associate professor score sheet, where there's an element of selection in terms of which criteria an applicant applies for. So there are some core criteria or some required criteria and then some selected ones. So you can see here, if you look at teaching and learning in column 2 here, that these are all score 3s. So that would become an automatic yes score. And quite similarly, if you look at column 1, there are a majority of 3s here and a few 2s. And that would become an automatic yes score. Where it looks a little bit different, perhaps, is if we go along here to column 4 of the optional criteria here, or the selected criteria, if you look at impact beyond the academic performance, there you can see we've got a couple of ones in here. This means that this will have much more detailed discussion. It doesn't mean that because there's a 1 in the column that this becomes automatically a no. As you can see in this example, there was lots of discussion here, and ultimately the score was a yes. So don't interpret a 1 as necessarily being, an automatic no in this context. But you can see, if you look at the example of the next column, there are 1s in here. It prompted a discussion, and in this case, the decision of the panel was no. I do have to emphasise hugely detailed discussion and consideration goes on in terms of the scoring of these columns where discussion is needed and where there's a range of scores to be considered. So just to add some more details to this, as candidates, you are expected to engage fully with your head of school, both before applying and after the outcome of the process, regardless of the outcome of the process. A head of school form, which must be countersigned by the deans, will be submitted by the head of school. And you as a candidate do have sight of that form, and you do have a right to respond to it. But clearly engaging with your head of school during this process will help with the head of school with that process as well. We use adjectives in the guidelines to describe really the level of sort of achievement or performance that we're looking for against each criteria at each level. And unless there's something explicitly different used within the criterion, it's as follows. So we use the adjective substantial for senior lecturer and associate professor. So substantial performance, substantial achievement. Outstanding for the professor in, and exceptional for the established professor. So you can see that there's a gradual sort of step upwards in terms of the level of performance that the committees are grading against as they look at the applications. In line, excuse me, in line with the principles that apply in this scheme, all promotional grades are open to all academic staff. So I've said that previously, so to remind you of that point. Following assessment and the establishment by the promotions committee of what we call a prima facie case. So the committee is saying that on the face of it, the case for promotion has been established. External assessors are then contacted. They're ranked by the committee, so you and your head of school will have nominated external assessors. These are ranked by the committee from the list provided, and then they will be contacted to give you external references. This is a really important part of the process in terms of making sure that we're well aligned with other universities of kind of equivalent standing, and particularly bringing in additional disciplinary expertise. So the nomination on the list should be gender balanced and have strong representation from international assessors with a broad global distribution. Assessors' nominations should all be from different universities, and a maximum of 2 nominations in total can be from institutions in the Republic of Ireland. So this is such an important part of the process. Just to reiterate that, we're looking for nominations that are gender balanced, that are really measuring your performance against international counterparts, globally distributed, from different universities. And we're saying that a maximum of 2 nominations can be from institutions in the Republic of Ireland. Where a nomination is from a research institute, the nominee, whether it's the applicant or the head of school, must demonstrably be able to comment on all elements of the academic profile, i.e. teaching and learning and contribution. So it's in no one's interests to nominate someone from a research institute who then writes in the report, I can't comment on teaching and learning, because we then have to go out and find another reviewer. Nominations from research funders, charitable foundations, and government organisations are not appropriate. Promotion will only follow if the external assessors clearly agree with the recommendation of APC, EPC. So this is an important part of the process. So again, still thinking about the nomination of the external assessors, they should be at least at the academic level in their own institution at which the candidate is applying for. Sorry, that sounds a bit awkward, but basically, we're asking people to be at least at the level at which you're submitting your application for, and in an institution or department of similar or higher reputational standing. These assessors must have no conflict of interest. Both the candidate and head of school who make nominations should avoid nominating anyone with whom the school or research institute has had recent formal interactions or with whom the candidate has collaborated. There are guidelines around conflict of interest on the promotions website, so do have a look at these. Assessors must also have appropriate experience of promotions to be able to carry out the task of assessing a prima facie case. Under no circumstances should the candidate or the head of school contact external assessors in advance of or during the process. And we do ask external assessors to make declarations around conflict of interest prior to completing the assessment. And external assessors are, in very large part, extremely thorough in identifying any potential conflicts of interest. Reapplication is not normally permitted within 2 years of an unsuccessful application, but there are some exceptions which I'll go into later. And submission of the application is via the HR portal. Again, you can find all of this through the website. So just a little bit of the background. So the professor in grade, and that's professor, and then as you can see here, within a specific discipline, was introduced in round 5. So this is the route that we have been using since round 5 of promotion applications, and the current round is round 11. Established professor, EP, has been in use since round 8. And each of these grades has 3 tracks. So teaching and learning, research and scholarship, and leadership. In the terms of the professor in, the level of achievement expected for promotion to professor in is sort of halfway between senior lecturer, associate professor, and that for an established professor. Leadership plays a more significant role in a professor in level in comparison to the senior lecturer, associate professor level, and the default adjective as used in the guidelines for criteria at this level, unless one of the others is explicitly used, is outstanding. In terms of the established professor, the level of achievement expected for promotion to established professor is double that of the senior lecturer, associate professor level. There's a significant emphasis on leadership, and the default adjective, as I've said previously, unless it's otherwise stated, is exceptional. So existing personal professors, as with all other grades, must go through the application procedure in order to be promoted to established professor. So in terms of meeting the criterion, it will be possible to fail to meet a single non-core criterion in your application and still be promoted if the assessment committee believes that there is enough compensating achievements in the rest of the application, and that there is an official definition of how this is done, but what we call this is basically establishing a prima facie case in the round. And again, I'll explain that a little bit more, but where the candidate's achievements in a majority of other criteria are in the academic judgment of the committee significantly above the level required, it can decide that the prima facie case has been achieved or has been met, even though there is a single single non-core criteria that was scored as a no. I made reference to a little bit of specific exceptions to reapplication rules. So in the event that the prima facie case isn't agreed, in particular circumstances, the 2-year rule is reduced to 1. So the exception to the 2-year rule, the other exception is a retention application, which we're not specifically talking about here. So in terms of promotion outcome, if the promotion outcome is successful, you can then apply again immediately in the promotion system. There isn't the statutory 2-year wait. If you fail on a single non-core criterion and are not promoted, you can apply again for any level after 1 year. If you fail on any core criterion or fail on more than one non-core criterion, then it's the standard 2-year wait. So in terms of supporting material, so in terms of submitting the application, an up-to-date, accurate IRIS profile with publications preferably organised by category and in reverse chronological order for each category is required. Just to clarify that, the IRIS system is remaining up and running and open for use until after the submission date. So I know we're making the transition to the CRIS system, but the IRIS system is the one that we're using specifically to allow this round of promotions applications to draw off IRIS. There's a requirement for some student feedback, so up to 2 pages of student feedback. And there's also a requirement to submit a teaching portfolio of up to 23 pages. Any information beyond the 23 pages in the teaching portfolio won't be considered. It will be redacted so that the committee can't see it. You're also asked to draw out the 3 strongest or most important publications and can add a commentary of 300 words max, indicating the originality, significance and rigour of the publication. And in cases of multi-author publications, the role that you yourself play as an applicant. The list of the next 20 strongest publications is also requested. There isn't any commentary required on this other than where needed to clarify the role of yourself as a candidate in multi-authored papers. There's an external assessor nomination form that needs to be completed, and there's also a request for 3 reference reports that need to be uploaded. 1 can be from an internal referee and 2 from external referees. So you need to identify and request those yourself. And please do refer to the checklist document to ensure that you have all the documents submitted to your application. This information is listed out in a number of places on the website, and there is, as it says here, a checklist so you can check that you have submitted everything that's required. It's really important that you get this right, that you adhere to the page limits, and that you don't miss out submitting any of this, because once the deadline is passed, if there's something missing, your application won't go forward. In addition, confirmation that your performance for growth review is up to date. And in terms of those who are making a reapplication, there's a box to check in the application form that is asking whether it's permissible. So I'll just read it because I'll just chew it up otherwise. In the event of the prima facie case that is initially considered not having been met, I authorise the Academic Promotions Committee to view the agreed score sheet from my most recent application at the same level and track. The purpose of this is solely a confidence check to establish and potentially reconsider a negative decision now on any criterion that was deemed to have been met in the earlier application. So it's allowing the committee to see previous scores to make sure something that was previously deemed a yes hasn't become a no in this round of scoring. So we call it a confidence check. It's only done with your permission, and there's a box that you can tick to indicate your permission to undertake this confidence check. In terms of the criteria, so this, if you thought we had detail before, there's now more detail here. So we'll start with senior lectureship associate professor type A contract. So as I've indicated, we have some core criteria. So in terms of the core criteria, reflecting the contract of a lecturer A, which is particularly focused on the teaching pathway, your research and scholarly activity is understood to refer to research and other forms of scholarship associated with research-informed teaching and with keeping up to date with the developments in pedagogy in your discipline. So this may include pedagogic research as traditionally conceived in the discipline, or a combination of the two. If you do include research of your own, you should elaborate on its significance. Where work is multi-authored, you should, in the narrative, elaborate on the extent and significance of your own contribution. So this is really recognizing that there's still a core criterion around research, but that the scholarly research can be within the research-informed teaching domain. There's also core criteria for substantial record of teaching, supervising and mentoring taught students, and a substantial contribution to organisational leadership and management aspects at a regional, national and international level, including external engagements, activities for and on behalf of the university that are beyond the confines of academic engagement. So there are these three core areas that are tailored towards a type A contract. If you're looking at type B, then it's a little bit different. So it's thinking about research and scholarship and research outputs aligned with your discipline. Just a flag around again, multi-authored publications and including a narrative to explain your own contribution to that. There is a requirement for a substantial record of teaching, supervising and mentoring taught students. And again, the importance of contributing to organisational leadership and management aspects, both within and externally to the university. And then, as I indicated previously, there are additional criteria where you can make a selection. So there are 10 criteria and you can select any 5. And that's not determined by which contract type you are on. So you can select the 5 criteria that you believe that you are able to perform best in. So in terms of the Prof in criteria, it's different. So there aren't the optional selections. So all of the criteria must be met under this track. So unlike with the previous slide where you could choose 5 of the 10, all of these must be met. And just also to highlight, you'll see that number 1 and number 7 here are core criteria. So these pick up areas such as sustained record of research outputs, research leadership, doctoral supervision, consistent track record of securing research funding, evidence of outstanding impact in research, internationally excellent standing in the discipline, and substantial contribution to teaching, supervision and mentoring of students. The one I've just walked you through there was the research and scholarship track. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different for the teaching and learning track. So again, thinking about the core criteria, in this case, you can see the outstanding contribution to teaching, supervision and mentoring of students. It's also worth highlighting, we've got 2 core criteria. So looking here at the teaching and learning track, the core criteria in relation to research outputs is defined as a substantial record. So we've got outstanding in relation to teaching and supervision, substantial in relation to research outputs. If I flick back to the previous slide, you can see that it's the other way around here, because this is the research and scholarship track, where the outstanding record of research outputs and then the substantial contribution to teaching and supervision there. So you can see that there are differences depending on which track that you're applying to. And then again, with the leadership track, again, there are a set of criteria that all must be met. In this case, there are a larger number of core criteria, with the outstanding level really being set around leadership at university level, and transformative leadership. But then you'll see that some of the core criteria are defined with this notation of substantial again. So there are nuances of difference in terms of the criteria depending on which track you're applying for. And again, you can apply for whichever track you feel is appropriate. And for all of the profins, there are two other core criteria that need to be met. So there's the one which is outstanding and sustained evidence of high quality organisational leadership and management. And then there's another one which is about outstanding and sustained contribution to intellectual, cultural, social and economic life externally to the university. So that can be at regional, national or international level. So that these two core criteria apply regardless of which track for the profin you're applying for. So now we move on to the established professor track, and I promise we are getting there. So again, with this, there's a list of 7 here. So this is again the research and scholarship track. There are 7 criteria that must be met. And again, here 1 and 3 are core criteria. And just highlighting again, because this is the research track, you'll see the words exceptional record of research outputs here. If we look where it's defined, where you see a different adjective, it's outstanding contribution to teaching, supervision and mentoring. So you can see there are nuanced differences depending on which track you're looking at. So as you'd expect, we see those reversed for the teaching and learning track: exceptional contribution to teaching, supervision and mentoring, and an outstanding record of research outputs recognised for originality, significance and rigour, etc. And the same with leadership. It's very much, a similar pattern that we saw with the profin, where we've got these large number of core criteria out of the 7. And again, we're looking at the adjective being exceptional around exceptional leadership here. And you can see areas where the adjective changes and it's looking at outstanding. So there we go, just to keep going. And again, as with the pattern for Professor In, there are these 2 other core criteria which apply to all tracks regardless, that you have to demonstrate against as well. So a few final comments and reflections to be aware of. So members of all of the committees, Academic Promotions Committee, Established Professor Promotions Committee and the Appeals Committee, the Academic Promotions Appeals Committee, are bound to absolute confidentiality in respect of all deliberations of their committees, and subject only to the fact that documents are FOIable after the process. And I can't emphasise enough how seriously and professionally the members of the committees take their roles and behave in respect of the work that they do. Under no circumstances should candidates approach or seek to influence members of the APC, EPPC or APAC or on any matter relating to their application schemes. And if this does occur, it will be reported by the committee member, and we will then have to follow up and take appropriate action depending on what's happened. Members of the APPC, EPC and APAC, is a bit of a word soup, I'm sorry, alphabet soup, may not advise applicants either individually or in groups in respect to the promotion scheme. So if you do want to talk to people, talk to people who have been through the process, but not the committee members. Heads of school and deans of colleges are required to respect and maintain the confidentiality of individual applications. So those people who have sight of your application and are part of this process are all expected and required to maintain confidentiality. So your application must be on the round 11 application form. And I think perhaps I'm just going to preface the things that I'm saying now with that there's scope to make unfortunate mistakes and oversights that lead to disappointment, in particular for applications not going forwards. So really, really do concentrate on the detail. So your application must be on a round 11 application form. Your iris profile must be downloaded as a Word document. So it can be downloaded as a Word document and edited. So that editing will allow you to ensure that there's a clear categorization of types of outputs. And again, the information about what's required is available to you on the website. Listing publications in each category in reverse chronological order. So the format that allows the promotions committee to find the information and assess your submission as effectively and easily as possible. So that can only work to your advantage to help the promotions committee to see the information you want to share with them. There's a reminder that following the deliberations of the APC and EPPC, there is an external assessment stage of the process, and that can be a little bit time consuming. So just because you've been told that there's a prima facie case established, it doesn't necessarily mean that you instantly get final confirmation. We have to go through the really important external assessment stage of the process. And if that external review isn't favourable, that you may not have your promotion confirmed. So please do allow yourself sufficient time to submit your application. Don't leave it until the last minute for technical glitches, oversights, waking up in the middle of the night and realising you missed off a document. Do all of those things in good time. So should you not complete the application in full, it won't go forwards for assessment, and you won't be allowed to adjust, amend, or add to the application once the deadline has closed. Please do, in completing the application form, be sure to address the specific information being requested in any one criteria or any one section, looking at the guidance document. So the guidance document is there to help you work out what you should be putting into each section against each criterion. I would say it's a common challenge for the committees when the information being offered in a section isn't really what the guidance is asking for. And then, I think you do yourself a disservice, and in all likelihood, you're not able to get a yes in that section. So do use the guidance to help you. Don't repeat information between different sections. So as a general rule, don't keep writing the same thing again and again and again in different sections. So there are exceptions to this that the committee are mindful of. So for example, it might be something where you can see different components of the same activity might be very relevant to two different sections. So that might be something related to research impact, for example. But it's then important that you clearly demonstrate how that activity is relevant to those sections, and that it's not a blurring of the lines. So otherwise it simply looks like double counting. And again, the promotions committee won't be able to accommodate that. So it's very important that if you are restating an activity, you explain how that then applies specifically to that section, and that you're not looking like you're just simply recycling the same information. And do seek advice on your application draft from experienced senior colleagues or colleagues who have been previously successful in the promotions process. I know it's not always comfortable, but getting a second pair of eyes on an application can be very helpful. To remind you, the deadline for submission is 4 p.m. on the 28th of February. That's a Friday. The rounds, as I said previously, take place every 6 months, but please don't leave it to the last minute, and please do ensure that you do submit everything that is requested. I've made lots of reference to information on websites. These are some of the websites. So the University of Galway academic promotion site has loads of information, checklists, guidance for you. A recording of this talk, which will, send you to sleep of an evening, will be available on the website. If you have any questions, there are quite a large number of FAQs on the website. But if that doesn't help you with your specific question, you can email academic promotions at universityofgalway.ie, and the application system is on the academic promotions homepage, again on the website. So there's lots there to look at and inform yourself with. Right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think we're going to stop recording the meeting, aren't we?
Yes, it stopped, Becky.
Lovely. Thank you.